Hello and welcome to the Ultrawizard Ramble, a podcast where every once in a while Kris Brown comes on here and we get a chance to talk to content creators from all different backgrounds. I'm Patrick Reagan. This is my good friend Kris Brown. I made him be silent for the first few minutes of the cast here, so you don't really have a chance to hear what he has to say. But we're super excited. We've been working on this project really hard. I've been putting in big work weeks to line up our first guests for the cast. We're going to talk to people from all different backgrounds. So this is going to be a bit of a variety show where we not only talk with ultra endurance athletes, maybe the lion's share of who we speak with are gravel cyclists and ultra endurance athletes in the running world, but we're going to talk to musicians, coffee roasters, people from all walks of life. So I'm super excited to welcome on my good buddy today, Kris Brown. And we're just going to workshop a little bit back and forth what the cast is going to be about and what our friendship looks like in terms of, when we met and how we decided to go on this cool adventure together. So
yeah,
Kris,
and eventually the end goal here is to get Mike Watt on the podcast. We just want to be clear about that up front. So Mike Watt, this is episode 1, but if you're hearing this, come on, buddy.
Yeah, so down in the show notes, we're going to tag Mike Watt, and the dream would be to be able to talk to him. I'm going to pause this for a second, Kris, because you're going to love this. All right, as a little bit of stimulus from Mike Watt, I've got a bobblehead of Mike Watt, Kris.
That's fantastic.
Right? So just so Mike knows we're not messing around, that we're real big time fans, we want to welcome this guy on, one of the greatest bassists of all time, from the Minutemen to the Stooges. Someday we'd love to talk to guys like that. But for now, we're going to talk to people of all walks of life, most of them in our communities, between Kris up in Missoula, Montana, between me and Savannah, Georgia. We're going to talk to individuals from all walks of life. So a little bit about me and Kris. We both are professional, long distance runners. We've been running for HOKA for years together, and we've had a chance to go on some really epic adventures. And one thing that I found out about traveling with Kris, getting to know Kris, and discovering hey, we're really good buddies, was we both have a love for really obscure music. So Kris, when in general did you think, oh man, we could probably talk about music as though it was an infinite well?
I don't know, man. Well, I think most people who end up really big music fans, I've had a couple specific long-term role models when it came to music. So early on, it was my dad digging through his tape collection. I had an older brother who I thought was, a little cooler than me. So anything that he listened to immediately became my favorite, whether I genuinely liked it or not. And then over time, I've kind of had similar people or similar types of people come into my life who just kind of, no matter what they gave me, I accepted it. And then that would send me down rabbit holes to find new things. So I've been lucky to have those sorts of role models in my life. Although I will say, even though that's been my origin story with weird music, I am typically pretty close-minded towards people offering me new things. So don't try it unless you're one of a few select people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there have definitely been things that I've told you about in terms of music that you didn't jive with.
Everything you send me has got a goddamn washboard in it. Just cut it out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are definitely things I send you that don't have a washboard, and we share a love for a few genres, especially, me and Kris last winter got to see Deaf Heaven together, which was an absolutely epic experience, getting to see Deaf Heaven with Midwife, down in Phoenix, Arizona. Let's talk a little bit about just in general, Kris, your musical love goes all the way back to the Pacific Northwest where you grew up. What bands were most influential for you that sort of started you down the path of just being a lifelong music fan?
I think it kind of started with, like I said, it started with my dad's tape collection. So I would just kind of dig through. He had just stacks and stacks of tapes, and I had just a little handheld tape recorder. So I remember sitting on the bus on the way to school, which was a relatively long bus ride, just holding this cassette player up to my ear. And I'd never really heard of any of the artists that I picked out, but I just kind of grabbed them one by one. I just remember specifically sitting there listening to bands like Depeche Mode and Joy Division. And eventually I got into this section of his tape collection that was long sessions recorded directly from the radio. And now this is in the early 90s, which was obviously a kind of a boom time in Seattle for the music scene. So he had these, and I was coming to this somewhat later because I was a baby at that in the early 90s. But come 1996, 97, I'm sitting on the, or maybe a little later than that, but I'm on the bus to school, and just listening to like this alternative radio stations New Year's Eve countdown from like 1993, or a long session where they had Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam come in and DJ, and which Pearl Jam's not exactly like difficult to access music, but he's on there kind of peacocking a little bit, like playing old Sonic Youth stuff and going as far deep into obscurity as to pull out the Wesley Willis records. So that's kind of my origin story with music.
Yeah, super cool. I mean, I know you have a love for Green Day's Dookie. What are some of your all-time favorite records? I know that's one of them.
Yeah, some of them, I mean, like as kind of towing the line between mainstream and more obscure stuff. Like it's hard not to give it up for some of the iconic ones like Dookie, for example. Obviously, Green Day is the iconic band when it comes to the debate about what it means to sell out and the moral argument about that. But dude, Dookie is a front to back just unbelievable record. And if you haven't listened to it in a while, go back and do it. But I'm always gonna have a soft spot for early 90s to early 2000s punk rock. So basically the whole span of the Warped Tour and all the bands that played there. That's when I'm going out on a run, or if I'm in a rough patch in life, or in any other occasion where I really need the music to carry me through, man, I'm always going back to NoFX and Bad Religion and the Descendants and Bouncing Souls and all that kind of sort of mid-period pop punk stuff. That's always going to be my favorite genre.
Yeah, awesome, man. I mean, I think that's where we connect at the origin and why we've delved down this rabbit hole of you introducing me to bands like Swans and me liking them, because we were open-minded for a long time about music, right? But the podcast isn't going to be all about music. Although we would love to wax poetic about our favorite bands, maybe we'll have an episode where we chat about that. We're also going to talk to professionals in our industry, right, that are interesting. And we love ultra endurance athletics in general. We especially love running. We would like to talk to people that have more going on than just running, though. And that's kind of where me and Kris meet in the middle, right? We have this deep love for music. I love playing music. Kris grew up playing music. But we also, Kris has been in the restaurant industry for a long time and has a deep understanding of food, of wine. We both have a deep love for coffee. So we plan to talk to people of all walks of life in that perspective on the cast. And we've got a real good roster too, right? Like our first 12 guests are all lined up, and they're all hyper interesting people from many different walks of life. So we want this to be a place where you can come a few times a month, listen to us chat, sometimes together, sometimes just me solo with a guest, and talk to people from all walks of life that got there in interesting ways. I view the Ultrawizard Ramble podcast as being a podcast about inclusivity and about diversity, not only in terms of who we are across the spectrum, but in terms of what we do with the time we have on the planet. So that being said, Kris and I are like both super excited to go on this wild ride with you. We want this to be a place that's comfortable for all, that you can come once a week, maybe at some point, definitely a couple times a month to get started. And we're here for it. We're looking forward to sharing it with you. Kris, do you have anything else in closing just for the general intro? We wanted this to be about 10 minutes to introduce some things we're talking about and get to know our guests.
Dude, I'm along for the journey. We'll see where it leads. I don't know much about what guests we have lined up, but I think the idea here is we come from the ultra running and ultra endurance space. And not only do people within that space have stories to tell that have nothing to do with their athletic feats, but I think both of us are tapped into enough communities outside of the ultra endurance space that maybe we can talk to some people, whether that's sommeliers and winemakers or Mike Watt eventually down the road. And so maybe an ultra runner who also likes Mike Watt would love to hear an ultra runner talk to Mike Watt. So that's, I think, maybe that can be our gift to the community.
Perfect. I hope when we talk to Mike Watt, it's just you talking to Mike Watt and I just get to sit here and
just bob your head,
Yeah. All right. Well, here's to Mike Watt. Hopefully we get to chat with him. Hey, thanks for joining us for this first little intro to me and Kris and the Ultrawizard Ramble podcast. We're excited to have you along for the ride.